Greetings, dear FLGTP members, community, gender activists. Welcome to this session. My name is Dr. Nontando Hadebe, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you. And I met most of you at the opening, the introductory section. And today I will be presenting a session that I have entitled The Symbol of the Three-Legged African Pot. All of us know the three-legged African pot, and I'm using that to symbolize the three spheres in the lives of women. We know that just as in the three-legged pot, if one of the legs are shorter than the other, then there's no balance. And so my argument is that the three spheres of women's lives, which I call the three C's, that is the Constitution, culture, and Christianity, are in conflict. And I want to begin with a story of many women. A professional woman goes to work. She may be the CEO or the head of departments. And at work, she has authority over both male and female. And she's encouraged because of the Constitution to study, and all the doors are open for her. But when she goes home, culture dictates that as the Makoti, who has been acquired through Lobola, that her role is to submit to her husband because this is our culture, she's told. And then she goes to her local church, and there she's told stories that women are the ones that brought sin into the world. Therefore, women are subordinate to men. So you can see from these stories that the same woman experiences three different realities. So the three legs are not the same. There's no agreement. And this in itself is a form of violence. So what we will do is that we will go through each of these three legs. We're going to define what culture is, just with a few quotations, and then the Constitution and Christianity in the light of the rights of women. And to say that whenever there's inequality, you know that there is violence, because somebody is required to submit to another person. And the conflict here is that women do not experience equality in all spheres of their lives, which means that there is disconnection. At work, you may be the CEO or the head of departments. When you come home, you are subordinates. In some cases, women don't have any voice or even have any say over their own salaries, because as the Makoti, you have been brought to the family through Lobola. And then, as I said already, when you go to church, depending on which church, your status is determined. So imagine you have to be a different person, experience different realities just because you're a woman. So let's quickly go through each of these factors. Firstly, culture is good. We all belong to a culture, and we are proud of our cultures. It is through our culture that we learn language, we learn the history, where we come from. And so when we are talking about culture, we are not going to condemn it. We are recognizing two aspects of culture. And to do that, we're going to read from a quotation from Kanyoro. Kanyoro says culture is a double-edged sword. In some cases, culture is the creed for the community identity. That's the good part. However, in other instances, culture is the main justification for difference, oppression, and injustice. So it's a double-edged sword. It has strong values that sustain and give us identity, and yet at the same time, it is used to deny us the equal dignity that is due to us. Kanyoro goes on to say all questions regarding the welfare and status of women in Africa are explained within the framework of culture. For example, women cannot inherit land or own property because it is not culturally right, whether the subject is politics, economics, religion, or social issues. None of these are safe from the sharp eyes of culture. Women in Africa are the custodians of cultural practices. So we are the ones who pass culture on generation after generation to our children. Women, we are the ones who guard cultural prescriptions through the fear of breaking taboos. Many aspects which diminish women continue to be practiced in various degrees, often making women objects of cultural preservation. Harmful traditional practices are passed on as cultural values and therefore are not to be discussed. They are not to be challenged or changed. In the guise of culture, harmful practices and traditions are perpetuated, and they are perpetuated by women who are the custodians of culture, and we pass on this culture to our children. Practices such as women genital mutilation, early marriages, and stigmatization of single women, barren women, and widows are not liberating to women. Yet it is, in fact, women who sustain these practices. Issues of this nature illustrate the reality of women's vulnerability in the face of cultural prescriptions. The complicity of women in oppressive society infers that women do not only accept their oppressive immediate condition as the status quo, but also compel their fellow women into accepting it as the norm. So we not only do accept these harmful practices, we actually pass them on. We actually insist in the name of culture, like this is our culture. And we tell other women to submit to practices that are harmful for them. So not only are we as women those whom culture harms, but we preserve even those cultural values in the name of holding on to our culture. Now, it's good to hold on to your culture, but we also need to be critical of those aspects that are harmful, and we need to challenge those. Some of the examples of socialization into gender norms are through proverbs. And some of the proverbs that I'll read are from different parts of Africa, but I think they send the same message. We know that not all proverbs are saying harmful things to women, particularly if women are playing their roles as good wives and mothers, which are very good roles. But there are also proverbs that diminish the life of women. So let's read some of those examples. Like a barren woman is like a leaking pot. These proverbs just speak for themselves, devaluing, dehumanizing barren women. A wealthy woman changes into a man. Again, the stereotype that a woman needs to be submissive. So when a woman is courageous and stands up for herself, then she's viewed as a man, as defying her role as a woman. And then a woman behaves like a kid, and as a result must be guided at all times. This view that women need to be under male care, that it's not good for women to be independent. Women must always be controlled. And then if a woman claims equality with a man, let her urinate upwards. So we see that some of these proverbs send a message that dehumanizes women. And then one of the circle theologians, Sophia from Zimbabwe, writes about how women in the family are socialized to accept violence from their husbands as the norm, and more dangerous, to keep quiet. So not only do they accept being victims of violence, but they're also told to keep quiet and keep it in the family. And she discusses two proverbs from Shona culture, which says that what shields a house is the roof, implying that whatever happens inside the house should be confined within those walls, never to be revealed to those beyond. So if a woman is being beaten or abused, this cultural practice says that she needs to submit. She's not allowed to tell anybody. And then another one, it says the stomach is like an elderly woman. It does not reveal what it has swallowed, suggesting that just as the stomach does not reveal to anyone what it's been swallowed, the woman should never reveal what is going on in her marriage. So the second C is Christianity. We know that, in Christianity, we are told that everybody is created in the image of God, and yet women are treated as lacking equality with men. So if gender equality is at the core of religions, which I've just mentioned, why is religion one of the greatest stumbling blocks to a woman's rights and equality? So we see in religion this unequal equality. It says you are equal because you're created in the image of God, but you're not equal. You're not equal to a man. So religion becomes a stumbling block to women's rights and equality. Women's rights are often denied in the name of culture and religion. Questions related to culture and even religious preservation, we need to ask. Whose interests are served by traditions and customs that control women's autonomy, production, and reproduction? Who is defining culture? So we need to be asking those questions. We see women theologians are challenging patriarchy and male supremacy. They question patterns of theology that justify male dominance and female subordination, such as an exclusive male language for God, the view that males are more like God than females, that only males can represent God as leaders in church and society, that women are created by God to be subordinate to males and sin by rejecting their subordination. So women theologians challenge that. And so the third C is the Constitution. If we look at the South African Constitution, it is a result of the struggle by women to make sure that their rights and needs are reflected in the Constitution. The most significant provisions relate to gender equality in the Bill of Rights. Another clause talks about women's protection. Everyone has a right to freedom and security, which includes the right to be free from all forms of violence from either public or private source. Even the Constitution provides a framework for the promotion of gender equality. It contains several provisions that advance gender equality. It prohibits unfair discrimination on the basis of race, gender, or sex. So the rights emphasizes what needs to happen to achieve equality in all spheres of society. But there is a conflict of the three C's. The Constitution guarantees, promotes, and legalizes equality for women and protection from violence. However, culture, as we've seen earlier, subordinates women to men. And when that is done, people, even in women says, but it's in my culture. I have to obey my husband. I can't talk about domestic violence. And also we saw that even Christian beliefs and practices subordinate and inferiorize women as God's will, or they say, this is what the Bible says. Now, there's an African proverb that talks about conflict. It says that the village burned down because of the disagreement or lack of cooperation between the wind and the clouds. Similarly, the lack of agreement and cooperation among the three C's has a deadly impact on the lives of women. There's a relationship between gender-based violence and the conflict of the three C's. So what are some of the ways in which we can think outside of the box? What are some of the questions? Sometimes maybe we need to ask different questions. Instead of saying, is this part of my culture? We need to ask different questions. And Naidu and Ghazal says, the questions that we need to ask is, how do these beliefs and practices help or hinder the establishment of healthy people, families, and society? What would be the outcome if questions of health and viability rather than cultural preservations were at the center of decision-making process? In other words, instead of saying, is this part of my culture or not, we need to be asking, does this promote life? Does this promote liberation? Does this promote equality, health, flourishing? And if we change the questions and begin to reframe the questions and as about health and flourishing and development and growth and healthy relationships, then we will be thinking in a different way. So the key here is, how about asking questions, different questions, not this is my culture or this is not my culture, but is this the best choice that promotes equality, justice, and flourishing of life? And then Ilsemi says, so he suggests a way between the conflict of culture, religion, and human rights. He says we need to shift from idealizing the past to a liberative engagement with the present. We need to have a reverence for life rather than a reverence for cultural values. So if those cultural values don't promote life, we need to let them go. And I'm just thinking of the passage. This was a fundamental challenge that faced Jesus all the time. If you remember the story, and we'll end this with this story of the woman who went to the temple, the synagogue, and the religious leader said, no, you can't heal on the day of the Sabbath. And Jesus said, no, I will heal, because the life of the human being is greater than the culture, the laws of the culture. And he even went as far as to say the Sabbath was meant for human beings and not human beings for the culture. So if something doesn't promote the well-being, then the well-being of the person is more important than culture. So the well-being of women, the well-being of communities, the equality of women, the flourishing of women needs to be at the center. So how do we evaluate our culture and our religion? We ask the question, and we use Jesus here as an example to say, is this action, is this culture, does this cultural belief promote life, or does it diminish life? Does it promote equality, or does it push for inequality, and in doing so create the context for violence? So we need to be asking different questions and demanding that our cultures and our religions put human flourishing first. Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and life in abundance. So we need to be asking religious practices, is this practice that you are saying promoting the full flourishing of women, justice, and equality? Is this cultural practice that you are saying promoting the flourishing of women and everybody else? So we need to be asking different questions so that we can have different answers. So maybe you can come up with your own questions, but I think these two authors allow us to think in a different way. And so we even have our own circle of women theologians who say that their theology, which challenges both culture and religion, they say it's critical. It's the study of the causes of women's oppression, the struggle against social, cultural, and religious patriarchy. They are committed to eradication of all forms of oppression against women through a critique of the social and religious dimensions, both in African culture and Christianity. African women's theologies take women's experiences as a starting point. They take women's experiences as the starting point. The women who are told that they need to be silent when they are beaten. African women theologians listen to their stories and challenge that theology. So I think that we can see the important role of African women theologians. So we'll conclude with Luke 13:12, the story of a woman who was bent over, and Jesus said to her, "You are released from your affliction." Indeed, this is the message to say, woman, you are released from cultural, religious affliction that threatens your well being.